You're listening to episode 146 of the D6 Podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect church and home. And guys, listen, if you haven't figured it out yet, it is like a holiday around here in this building because it's time for D6 Days. Woo! And we have with us not
another
only
voice, if you haven't heard already.
Not only my co-host Ron Hunter, but the one and the only Lena Wooten, the queen of all marketing efforts here at D6.
Okay.
Lena, D6
Yes.
Days is happening now. In fact, they should probably pause this and go to d6days.com and sign up because they can still be a part of it.
They can still be a part of it. And the good news is that this year we're changing D6 Days up a bit. Have you guys already talked about this?
Oh, we've been talking about
Oh,
it.
yeah,
I hear
for
you
weeks.
say it.
For weeks. You
Okay,
tell
for
us.
weeks. Okay.
Make sure we got it right.
Good. So D6 Days is changing it up this year. We are doing a Netflix approach to D6 Days.
We haven't said it like
Ooh,
that.
We have not.
Well,
we should have
see?
been saying it like that.
I don't think we've been talking about this. Tell us more.
Okay, so this
Our audience is totally clueless.
Okay, well, the Netflix approach means on Netflix you can go in at any time and go in and watch whatever show you're wanting to watch, right?
Correct.
So for D6 Days, for 3 days straight, we're going to have all of our, I wouldn't say our top, but some of our favorite D6 conference talks up there. It's free, so for 3 days, go on there. Watch your episodes. You can pause it. You can come back and watch it. One of the things we were hearing during D6 Days this past year was people in other countries were wanting to watch. People were having appointments and things, so they were having to miss some of the talks. And so we listened to our people, and we're doing this approach this year.
Listening to the people. That's
That's
what
right.
you do, Lena Wooten.
That's right.
So we've got Carol Barnier, Kyle Ottoman, Brian Haynes, Emerson Eckrich, Lydia Randall, T.P. Jones, otherwise known as Timothy Paul Jones,
That's
Robbie
right.
Gallaty, Lee Strobel, David Platt, Richard Ross, Tim Kimmel, Sean McDowell,
Wow.
holy smokes.
Right?
David Platt
And more.
and more. That's right.
That's right.
Wow. So, and here's what's cool. If they haven't, even though D6 Days is kind of already happening, it's all on demand. So they can jump
That's
in,
right.
grab it. But it goes away when? If you're listening real time, it goes away on February 13th. That
That's
would be
right.
the last day. So
That's
we
right.
make
February
sure
11th,
we grab
12th,
that.
and 13th. And
That's right.
there's a good chance that you're ahead of this. But if you delay on this, you're going to miss out on the content. And if you do, we've talked about this before too, you can go right back to the Media Vault of D6 Plus and get much of the content. You won't get D6 Days immediately, but it will happen over time
That's
if you're
right.
a member.
All the content will be there.
Eventually
That's
be there.
correct.
That's correct. So
Speaking of great content, as part of the D6 Days celebration on our podcast today, we have two names that you will absolutely enjoy and probably know and recognize. First one is Lee Strobel, the man who wrote Case for Christ and also has a great movie about his life. We go into detail about that. And one of my favorite parts of this interview is when he talks about the actor that played his father and how when the director said cut, that actor stayed in character as Lee Strobel's father and went and gave Lee a message. It's a powerful story. You're going to love it.
Absolutely.
And then our next guest is Sadie Robertson.
That's right, Sadie Robertson from A&E's Duck Dynasty. And again, she's going to be able to talk to us about helping our kids be who God made them to be. Talk about a young lady who has had multi-generational influence. If you've ever watched the show or you've seen their family off the show, they are genuine, they are real, they're very intentional. And, we were talking in a previous episode about the importance of being around the table. they value the table time, and they've been intentional. And Sadie is certainly somebody who's developed into her own, and she is a godly lady, and she's doing great things in her talks, in her writing, and in her example.
She's built her own little platform. She's been on Dancing with the Stars. She's written books, and she's a very accomplished speaker, as we learned at the D6 conference this year. You guys are going to enjoy that. So we've got two big, huge, awesome guests, along with everything that's going on with D6 Days at D6days.com.
Plus Lena Wooten. We have Lena Wooten with us. Yay!
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, everybody. After this break, we're going to go ahead and get started, get going with Lee Strobel. We'll talk to you then.
Since 2009, the D6 Conference has empowered thousands of church leaders to embrace family ministry and strengthen the connection between church and home. Reaching that many church leaders, think of how many homes and communities across the world have been impacted in the last 9 years. My family, like yours, is among them. As a team here at D6, we've had the privilege of being in Dallas, Louisville, and Greensboro, plus 5 other countries. So each year we prayerfully consider the best place to host this growing international gathering, and we have a big announcement to make. After thoughtful consideration and prayer, we are excited to announce the D6 Conference in 2019 will be hosted in beautiful Orlando, Florida. Did you hear me? Orlando, Florida. The entire team at D6 cannot imagine a more iconic city where you can see families of all ages come together, the very basis of generational discipleship. Imagine debriefing your discipleship strategy on Tom Sawyer Island in the heart of Magic Kingdom. Or take a day at Universal Studios to dream of what your church could do in family ministry. The conference will be hosted at the state-of-the-art Marriott World Center. You gotta check this place out. It's both beautiful and offers fun for your entire family ministry team. So come spend some time away from your daily routine in an affordable city and convention center designed for your family. The D6 Conference is the conversation, Orlando is the venue, but your team brings the chemistry. The D6 Conference always provides world-class learning, networking, and access to family ministry resources. And now we get to do that with you in a brand new way. We can't think of a better place to host the D6 Conference. So lock the dates in your calendar, and we'll see you and your team here in Orlando in 2019.
I tell you what, I've got a great gig sometimes, man. I get to meet some really cool people, and I'm going to introduce to you guys a really cool person today. My guest is Lee Strobel, atheist turned Christian. Lee Strobel, the former award-winning legal editor of the Chicago Tribune, is a New York Times best-selling author of more than 20 books. The book that many of them will know you by is Case for Christ, which was also a movie. He serves as a former professor of Christian thought at Houston Baptist University and as teaching pastor at Woodlands Church in Texas. Lee and Leslie have been married for 46 years and live in Texas. 46 years, man. You're close to 50 years of marriage.
I know.
Wow.
We're trying to figure out what do we do on our 50th. It's got to be better than our 20th. Our 20th was no good.
Worthy of celebration for sure. Their son Kyle is a professor of spiritual theology at the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. So you got a professor in the family,
Yes,
huh?
that's right. My daughter's a novelist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good job. Well, that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how to engage the minds of our kids.
Yeah.
We have children's ministers, youth ministers, but also parents that are listening to this. And all of us are trying to, we're helping families teach their kids. That's the whole idea. We want to pass down faith inside the home.
Yeah.
But one of the ways we have to do that is to engage the mind. In fact, Matthew 22:37, it says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, right? So that's what I want to talk about with you today, how to engage the mind of our kids. But before we get too far, I want to hear about the book Case for Christ. We do all know you from that, and there's a story behind that. And for those who haven't heard it, could you share the story?
Sure. Yeah, I was an atheist for much of my life. My background's in journalism and law, and I began calling myself an atheist actually as young as high school, and consequently lived a life that was congruent with that. It was a very immoral and profane and narcissistic lifestyle. My wife ended up coming to faith through a woman she met who was a Christian nurse. They became best friends. We had kids the same age. Our kids became best friends. And she shared Jesus with my wife, took her to church. And my wife checked it out after many months, came up to me and said, I made a big decision. I've decided to become a follower of Jesus, which I thought was the worst news I could get as an atheist. Yes. But I figured I could certainly rescue her from this cult if I could just do something very simple, which was to disprove the resurrection. Because as a journalist, I've seen a lot of dead bodies, and none of them have ever come back to life, especially after 3 days. So I thought I could do it in a long weekend. Well, I ended up spending 2 years of my life using my journalism and legal training to investigate the historical data for the resurrection, ultimately becoming convinced that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, but he backed up that claim by returning from the dead. And so on November the 8th of 1981 at 2 p.m, I reached my verdict in the case for Christ, which was the evidence was clear and compelling. And I read John 1:12, it says, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. And I noticed that verse forms an equation of what it means to become a child of God. Believe plus receive equals become. So I believed based on the data that Jesus was the unique Son of God. But I realized that wasn't enough. I had to receive this free gift of forgiveness and eternal life that Jesus purchased for me on the cross when he died as my substitute to pay for all of my sin. So I received this free gift of grace on that day, became a child of God, and then over time, my values, character, morality, attitude, philosophy, parenting, priorities, and everything began to change as I followed Jesus.
Yeah. And if people haven't read the book, there's also a movie that's been made of your story. It's called The Case for Christ as well. And I guess I just would like to kind of hear, what was it like to see your life on film in front of the whole world?
Well, a lot of it was embarrassing because we tried to be honest in the film, and we showed quite accurately. In fact, we downplayed some of my behavior before I was a Christian, things I'm not proud of. What people saw was me winning awards for investigative reporting. What they didn't see was the other side, which was me literally drunk in the snow in an alley on Saturday night. And so we showed a lot of that, and that's hard to let people in on. I had a friend who watched the movie who told me later, he said, I didn't know you were such a jerk. So it's emotional. The PureFlix, who made the movie, sent us a link that we could watch the film on our computers before it came into movie theaters. And I walked in one day, and my wife, Leslie, was watching it again. And I said, how many times do you watch this? She said, 11 times. I said, why do you keep watching it? And she said, I'm trying to get cried out so that when I see it in public, I don't cry. And then we saw it in public, and we both cried. But, so it's tough to see it, but, we knew... I'm an evangelist at heart. I want to see people come to faith, and I knew we couldn't pull our punches if we wanted people to understand there's a true story. It's based on what actually happened, and even though there is some time shifting and composite characters and so forth in order to make it into a 90-minute film, it's about 85% accurate, which is very high for a based on true story film.
Yeah, and I saw an interview, you tell the story, I want to make sure our listeners get to hear it as well, of the moment that happened in the making of the film where the man who played your father, he did something significant for you.
It was very interesting that one of the subplots of the movie, and a lot of it ended up on the cutting room floor, so you don't see a lot of this, but my relationship with my father was a factor in my going down the road to atheism. If you look at the famous atheists of history, Camus, Sartre, Nietzsche, Freud, Voltaire, Wells, Feuerbach, O'Hare, they all had a father who either died when they were young, abandoned them when they were young, or with whom they had a very difficult relationship. And the implication is if your earthly father has hurt you or disappointed you, why would you want to know a heavenly father? He's only going to be worse. And so this was a factor, I believe, in my going down the road to atheism. Not only did I have intellectual objections, but my father and I had a terrible relationship. He, on the eve of my high school graduation, looked at me and said, "I don't have enough love for you to fill my little finger." So in the movie, we were depicting some of that, and the actor who played my father came up to me. We hadn't met yet, and he stayed in character as my father, which was kind of a weird thing. He actually looked a lot like my dad. My dad's deceased, he came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry." And at first I didn't know what he meant, but then I realized what he was doing is standing in the stead of my father and trying to reconcile in a way that my dad no longer could because he'd now passed away. So it was a very kind and gentle and generous gesture to express love and regret for the bad state of our relationship. It was a very moving moment.
Yeah, it's moving to hear.
Yeah.
My goodness. All right, so let's kind of transition to our theme today. If your kids were to ask you, "Dad, what does it mean to love God with your mind?" how would you flesh that idea out for them?
Well, I would explain in ways they could understand that when I met Leslie, my now wife, we were 14 years old. And I wanted to get to know her. I wanted to find out about her history. I wanted to learn about her family. I wanted to find out about her opinions about life and things that we have mutual interest in. I wanted to find out all I could about her because I was falling in love with her. And the same thing with God. We can't understand all the ways of God, just as a bear can't understand our ways. And the gap between us and God is bigger than the gap between a bear and us. So we don't have the capacity to fully understand God. But God, in His grace and wisdom and love, has provided us with what we need to know about Him. He's given us the Bible. And so this is our way to understand God, to learn more about Him. And we love someone more the more we understand about them. And we understand their attitudes and why they do certain things and the thinking behind the choices that they make. And the Bible explains those things in ways that we can understand. And so I'd say one of the ways we love God with our mind, one of the reasons we do that is we want to connect with Him, understand Him, and I don't have to use the word theology because it scares a lot of people, but to understand why He does certain things and what His practices are and what His outlook is and what His attitude toward us is and so forth. So I think that's loving God with our mind, and I think part of that is understanding why we believe what we believe. What is the evidence for the truth of the Christian faith? I think that's important too. We're told several places in Scripture, 1 Peter 3:15 and elsewhere, that it's important for us to understand why we believe what we believe, and that's using our mind to understand that our faith in God through Jesus Christ is not based on fantasy or make-believe or wishful thinking or legend or mythology. It's based on a solid foundation of historical truth. And so we want to understand what that truth is so that as the inevitable winds come that threaten to erode our faith, we'll be able to stand strong.
There's a certain type of person, and I'll probably line up in this category at times, that maybe struggles with doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I like to kind of think of it as I need things to kind of feel some kind of logical order for me to really believe and understand them. And that's obviously where you come from. So if we have a kid, if we have a child, son or daughter, who has that kind of brain, it can be alarming at times because you're thinking, oh no, are they going to reject our faith? Or maybe they have accepted it, now they're doubting it, and now it's this awkward place.
Right.
How can parents navigate that? What is a way that they can help that child?
First thing, if you see signs of your child who's raising doubts, questions, maybe falling away from the faith, is don't panic. I think a lot of people panic at that moment, and we need to understand that part of growing up is spreading our intellectual wings, looking at new ideas, questioning our old ideas and things that we've been taught. There's nothing wrong with that. So don't panic, number one. Number two, do pray consistently and fervently and expectantly for our children. And now I'm praying for my 4 grandchildren. I think that's an important element, when we look at the patterns in Scripture, that prayer is hugely important. But I think we want to keep lines of communication open with our kids and find out what are the obstacles, what are the doubts. Here's what often happens. Doubt is kind of like a bad dream, a nightmare. And if you remember when you're a little kid, say you're 7 years old, and you have a terrible nightmare about a monster, and the monster's chasing you, and it's horrible, and you wake up and you're in a sweat, and your heart's pounding fast, and you're full of anxiety and fear. And then you go into your parents' room, and you tell them, I've had this horrible nightmare. Now, if you talk about the nightmare and you begin to explain what happened in the dream, there was this monster under my bed, and he had 2 heads and 4 eyes, and then you start to laugh because you realize, okay, this is, and it loses its emotional grip over you when you talk about it. Yeah. And the same is true of doubt. If you hold it in, it can erode your soul. But if you talk about it and you discuss it, it begins to lose its emotional grip over you. And it becomes less of a boogeyman that's going to attack you in the dark, and something you can reason with and something you can analyze. And so that's why I think it's so important. What we did with our kids when they were growing up is we would have a safe time before they went to bed every night where it was okay to raise any question. And they got used to, and sometimes I think they did it to avoid going to bed, but they would, it was time when they knew it was okay to raise whatever issue that was on their mind. And so we could talk about it and we could discuss it. And I think keeping those kind of lines of communication open is so important, so that when those questions come up, they really begin to challenge their faith, that we don't panic and we have lines of communication open. Often, a tested faith ends up stronger than one that's never been put to the test.
Amen.
And so my experience is often that when we go through a period of doubt, we emerge stronger. It's like a bone, that breaks. You break your arm, like I broke my arm when I was in kindergarten. My arm at that point is stronger than my other arm now because the mending process has taken place. And I think the same is true when we process doubts and we work through them. We emerge with a faith that's been refined, like gold is refined. It's often stronger. Now, I will say too, there are some kids who are temperamentally prone to doubt. They tend to be melancholy. I have a friend like this named Mike, and he's a melancholy personality, and that personality tends to be prone to doubt. And to uncertainty and to hesitations. And it's important to understand the personalities of our kids so that we, if we have a child like that, we can say, okay, don't panic. This is part of who they are, and that's okay. Let me do my best to help them resolve whatever issue. And it's okay when they do raise an issue to say, wow, that's really a good question. I don't know how to answer that, but let's find out together. Because the advantage there is it leads to a further conversation, and you can model for your child how to research things to find a good answer, where to go, what to trust, what resources are trustworthy. First thing I look at when I pick up a book, who published it? That tells me something about the reliability of the book. To teach them those things so that when we're not there, they'll know how to do their own research and come up with their own resolution.
I got one last question. I got 2 boys. They both have become Christ followers. I hope and dream that one day they'll get to that place where they go off to college. What I don't hope and dream is that when they get there, they'll run into somebody like you, atheist version of you, who at one point was a critic of the faith, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of a fear of Christian parents, is that, and then asking ourselves, how do we prepare our kids to run into folks like who you used to be?
Yeah.
How do we prepare them for that?
Because they will. They will run into those folks. This is the phenomenon of our age, that because of the internet, there are a lot of what I call village atheists. They're not educated particularly in atheism or in philosophy, but they think they know a lot because they read an article on Wikipedia. And so they know enough to sow some doubt. They know enough to raise the difficult questions. And so, I want to tell my kids the same thing that I tell parents, which is, first of all, don't panic when somebody raises a question. They're good answers to the toughest questions of life and faith. So don't panic. You've learned, because of modeling through high school and so forth, how to find answers to tough questions. And I encourage them to kind of go on the offense as well and say, wow, you're an atheist. That's fascinating. Would you be interested in watching a debate between one of the greatest atheists in the world and one of the greatest Christians in the world? And then let's talk about it. Well, how do you pass that up? Well, then go online, and the debate between William Lane Craig and Christopher Hitchens at Biola University before Christopher Hitchens died a few years ago is a terrific debate to watch.
Wow.
I'll quote to you the atheist commentator opinion of that debate. He said, quote, Bill Craig, the atheist, or the Christian, spanked Christopher Hitchens like a foolish child. That's the atheist evaluation. But, to be able to say, why don't we watch a fair intellectual shootout on the topic of faith and talk about it. The other thing I encourage people to do is to major on the resurrection. When somebody raises an obscure Old Testament objection to me, sometimes I'll just look at them and say, are you saying Jesus didn't rise from the dead? They'll say, no, I'm not talking about did Jesus rise from the dead. Well, I am, because that's the linchpin of the Christian faith. And why don't we talk about that? Because everything depends on that. And we have such good, reliable historical data for the resurrection of Jesus. That's a great place to major in. That's why I encourage young people to really learn why it is that the resurrection can be trusted as an actual historical event. There's evidence inside and outside the Bible that provide a very strong case for that. And that was what ultimately brought me to faith. And so I encourage people to use that technique and say, are you saying Jesus didn't rise from the dead? Because we can set aside some of these peripheral issues. And let's set aside the question of whether the Bible is inerrant. Set that aside. That's a question for later. We don't need that issue right now. The one we need, and Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 17, if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile. You're still in your sins. So this is the ball game. So let's look at that. And and now we're on really good historic ground to be able to defend the faith. So sometimes we use a little technique to get back to those issues that are the strongest supported historically.
This was fabulous. I'm so honored that you're with us. The Case for Christ is your book. It comes in many different formats, right?
Yeah. We have a student edition for teenagers. We have a children's edition for little kids.
Oh, great. I didn't know that.
Yeah. All my books have those. And I work with experts on childhood education and student ministers in order to do those books. So I'm not an expert on dealing with kids except my own grandkids at this point. But so we did that. And we did that, interestingly, because of the demand. When I was working on the Case for Christ book, one of the scholars said to me, nobody's going to read your book. I said, why not? He said, young people particularly are not interested in evidence for the faith. They don't care about that stuff. We live in a postmodern world. And I was all depressed. Nobody's going to read the book. And yet, what we found through the years, the single biggest group of people who come to faith through the book are 16 through 24-year-olds, young people. Wow. And that's why we did a student edition. That's why we did an edition for children, because of the demand. They want this stuff. They're interested in this stuff. And in a world where, as you say, they're going to get challenged, it's good to inoculate them against that by giving them good reasons why we believe what we believe.
Well, whether it's Case for Christ or one of his many other resources, I hope you guys will go to leestrobel.com and check out all that he has to offer. His name is Lee Strobel. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Our team at D6 have put together top family ministry resources that will help you do family ministry well. We call it D6 Plus, an online monthly subscription for every age and stage of ministry. Adult, youth, and children's leaders can now enjoy ready-to-use family ministry resources and training from the team at D6 Family. What can you expect with D6 Plus? First, you get the D6 Conference year-round, with a media library filled with main stage talks and breakout sessions from every year of the D6 Conference. D6 Plus also provides teacher training videos and emails to help your team excel at family ministry. D6 Plus includes a toolbox of one-page talking sheets to guide families through pain points. D6 Plus also offers sermons and lesson outlines, countdown videos, and creative graphics. In addition to the resources and training provided online, D6 Plus members receive other perks, family ministry books sent directly to you throughout the year for free, plus special VIP benefits at the D6 Conference. D6 Plus, family ministry resources and training to help you and the parents in your church have an excellent family ministry.
Jeremy, you were right. I can't believe that moment. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was almost a tearjerker for me. It was, and here's my thing: the vulnerability. I just wanted to. I was in the moment with Lee, but that actor, he's a famous actor. I wish I could tell you his name, but the actor that played his father, I just wanted to go find him and hug him for doing that for Lee. That's a great moment.
That's a gift that he gave him.
Oh, and speaking of gifts, Miss Sadie Robertson is next. I really don't want to take a whole lot of time because let's just keep the fun going. It's d6days.com day, you know?
So, Lena, take us into Sadie. Introduce and jump.
Yeah, so Sadie Robertson is who we're going to be hearing from next. I have a 19-year-old daughter who is an absolute fan of Sadie's, really looks up to her and listens to all her stuff, reads her books, and so we're super excited to have Sadie next.
Let's listen to Sadie. Well, hey, everybody, this is an exciting interview we have with us Sadie Robertson. Thank you for being at D6.
Yes, glad to be here.
Now, most people who hear this are going to know you, but in case they didn't catch the A&E reality show Duck Dynasty, you are a part of that. You're also on Dancing with the Stars and things like that. But what we are most excited about is your we're just joking. Your Live Original Tour that you launched in 2016. And you also are a New York Times best-selling author of your book, Live Original. Your newest book, Live Fearless, is coming out soon as well.
Wow. Crazy.
How old are you, please?
21.
21, and look at that.
Well,
I mean, it's all downhill from here, Sarah. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
That's a lot, though. That's a lot of life.
Yeah, it's a lot of life. I'm telling you, like, only God, it really is. It's really crazy. Really crazy.
Well, it seems like your theme is the theme that I'd love to have for our interview, which is the message you've been bringing out, which is being who God made you to be. And just so you know, the people that are listening to this, for in the most part, are going to be children's ministers, youth ministers, and churches.
Yeah.
And they're working with kids and teenagers, especially kids and teenage girls that need this message, right?
It's awesome.
So let's kind of go from here. You have written that book, Live Fearless, and you're getting ready to go back on tour. So I'm sure there was some pressure for you as you kind of came into all of this celebrity to conform and to change. Let us in on that pressure, because when we talk about being who we are, we got to face pressure first, right?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it was kind of interesting. I think that people think like, oh, you're on Duck Dynasty, that means that like your family is like famous and successful and stuff. But that's like not necessarily the case, especially not how we saw ourselves, because a week before Duck Dynasty came out, that's not what our story looked like. You know, we just live in Louisiana and live in a normal life with a family who started a business that makes duck calls, you know? So that's just who we are. We always, Christian family, my grandparents really instilled faith throughout my parents and then them in my life. And so that's just kind of how I grew up, and that's how we love life. And then So when Duck Dynasty started, there really wasn't a dramatic change for us because we all still lived in Louisiana. We were all going to church still every Sunday. We lived in the same neighborhood. It was actually normal from like the far away and like the interweb and like TV and all this stuff. We were like blowing up, but in Louisiana it was pretty normal. Besides, of course, more people ordered duck calls and bought T-shirts and
that's
stuff,
great.
which is great. But then I think for me, when everything changed was when I got asked to do Dancing with the Stars, because this was the time where I was actually had to move to LA, and it was the first time that it wasn't just my whole family, it was me. And that's whenever it got really weird to me. And there was like a lot of pressure with that because there's 20 million people who are watching you weekly and judging you and critiquing you, not only by your dance, but the way that you look and the way that you hold yourself. And so it was really interesting. And not just actually my family always says this, we're like, we don't get as much hate from the world as we do from the church, which was really hard because that was a weird pressure that I hadn't felt. So I kind of had this moment after Dance with the Stars, and I was like, okay, God, like, what's happening? It was almost like I felt like he chose the wrong person. I'm like, I don't know why I'm in this position, because what I felt like, and this is not true, but what I felt like was that the church world wasn't liking what I was doing. The world wasn't really accepting me for who I was, so I didn't really fit anywhere. I couldn't really go back to school because all of like my friends who have known me forever were like looking at me different, but then I couldn't like not go back to school because that would mean I have to go to LA. And I was really in just this moment like, God, what is this, you know? There was so much pressure, and in my mind the reason why I didn't want to go to LA or be famous or have this fame tied to my name is because I looked at everybody else who was successful and famous, and I don't look like them and I don't act like them, and I don't want to be known for some of the things that comes with. And so I was like, God, I don't know where you have me. And I remember so clearly, I was at this conference actually, and I was just in the crowd, and it was the first time I responded to an altar call. And I don't even remember what the call was. I think it was just like, if you have been seeking him and you need to find him, then like come to the front. And at this point, like honestly, I had been so uptight about like who's looking at me, and I just was like, lay it all out, like whatever. And so I just go to the front and just break. And I remember so clearly, for probably one of the first times I ever heard God really speak something to my heart. I said, where do you have me? What do you want me to do? I don't want this fame. And he said, don't look at it as fame. Look at it like I'm giving you a position to be a sister and a friend to people who don't always have a sister and a friend. So you just be a sister and a friend. And so for the next 4 years, I guess since that day, like I know my lane is to be a sister and a friend. And so that takes off the pressure of having to be this like famous person. It takes off the pressure of having to like be perfect or look perfect, because a sister and a friend's not perfect. They're just real and they're relatable, and they try to encourage the ones that are around them. And so I think it's like the kindness of God to speak that over me. And so every book, every message, every blog post, every podcast, everything's done with the intent of how do I become more of a sister and a friend to people who might not have that. And with that, that comes with the hard times in my life, the failures in my life, the transparency that I would want to give, and also the goofy side. And so it was just really kind. I don't think that he could have spoken a more perfect word for me to say yes and it not seem like so daunting, you know?
So you're obviously connecting with, because that message you just shared is that's going to connect. And so as you're kind of making an impact on girls and young girls all around the world, what are you seeing God do?
Oh man, it's been crazy. I've seen sisterhood a lot. I've seen friendship a lot. I've seen it really in a unique way how social media and like YouTube and all that can be used in a positive way. How it really can bring forth connection, and it really can bring forth really changing people's life on the other side of the screen. And I think that comes with a lot of prayer, and there's like more to just an Instagram post, there's more to just a YouTube video, but I've seen God use that in a mighty way. And then through the tours, it's really cool because we take what we build this relationship online, and then we actually get to be face to face, and then have this night of worship and fellowship and more encouragement, and give them this opportunity to hopefully lead them to either, if they haven't ever, accepting Christ. And so I've seen this little idea of being a sister and a friend take off to be this actually like transforming journey for people to go on to really finding God. Because one of the things that I remember the Lord really showing me in that time was if you think that you're like all eyes are on you, then like you're totally missing it. Like take that off, because nobody's supposed to be led to you. It's supposed to be led to me. So just think of yourself as like a bypass, you know? And there's no like humble yourself enough to think that that's an amazing thing to be. And so I think when people come to my page, if I can lead them to that encounter, that's the best place. I mean, that's the coolest thing ever. So I've seen that happen, and it's really cool.
So you have been willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. And then you said yourself, on the other side of that, you had haters and people come at you.
Yeah.
There's no way, at the level of which you've exposed and allowed people to see your life, there's no way. I feel like there's some lessons in that for young girls that may be listening to this.
Yeah.
And I know you have that. What do you say to a young girl maybe who is afraid to put herself out there because she doesn't want to deal with what you face?
Yeah.
Or the one who has put herself out there and is facing it?
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
That's great. You know, honestly, if I'm being totally real, I still get hate. Like today on Instagram, go look up, you can guarantee go look at any picture I've ever posted and read the comments. You're going to see some really hateful, mean things.
Do you get used to it?
Yeah, you get used to it. I mean, sometimes it might bother you in a way, but it really doesn't bother me anymore. It used to. It used to really weigh on me. But when you know that you know that you know who you are, and you know that you know what you've been called to, it doesn't bother you. You can go look at mostly anybody's story in the Bible. Like, they all got hate. Like, they all got made fun of. They all got picked up. God never said, like, oh, yes, I'm going to call you to this, and everything's going to be amazing and wonderful, and everybody's going to cheer you on. Like, that was never a thing. And even for Jesus. And so to have the expectation, you're just going to be disappointed in that, because that wasn't a promise. But there is promise and a confident trust in him. There's promise that when you know who you are, that like there is this hope for eternity. There's this like thing so much further beyond like yourself and what you're doing that it just doesn't really matter. And so then you can really see truth from lie. And so I think if you're in it, I think that one, you're going to have to just know that that may happen, but it doesn't have to affect you. Like, it really actually doesn't. And that comes from just a confident trust in knowing who you are and knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's really, really, really important to know the why and to remind yourself of that a lot. Because if you don't, then it's going to hurt. And that's a continual thing. I think that's a constant renewal of your mind, really.
Well, thank you for putting yourself out there. And thank you for, with the platform that God has given you, using it to honor him. Thank you, because it is an example for so many to follow. I don't want you to go before you tell us more about your tour and your new book, and just share with us what you have going on that we can be a part of.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So this year we're going to 20 cities on the Live Original Tour. And Mosaic MSC is coming out and leading worship. They're amazing. Most people know the song Tremble. That's like their biggest hit right now, but they have so many amazing worship songs out. And so I'm excited personally to get to worship 20 cities, 20 nights, with
awesome.
them. And then Social Club Misfits, they're hilarious. They're coming out, and their music's super fun and really connects with that high school, college age. And so I'm pumped. This is going to be a good night. And the whole theme is on unity. It's on United We Stand, Divided We Fall. And so it's going to be really good.
So if somebody wants to be a part of this or see your books or see your resources, they can go to liveoriginal.com.
Yep, everything's on there.
Well, you've been listening to Sadie Robertson, who has blessed us with her presence today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to you going down. You're about to head down and speak at the general session. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
It means a lot that you took time to be with us.
Thank you so much. It's great.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening with us. It's Sadie Robertson, Lee Strobel, but we want to make sure you understand that there is a lot more free content. If we said this the other day, Ron, if we were charging for this content, it would be in the hundreds.
It would be. Yeah, absolutely. We were talking $200-$300 for you and your team to gather around. This is our gift to you.
Free.
That's right. So Netflix, but free, as Lena said.
There you go. And so we hope you guys will take advantage of that. It is only available for a few more days if you're listening to this in real time.
D6days.com.
Yes, D6days.com. Also, please don't forget that while D6 Days is happening, we have open the online resource D6 Plus.
That's right. Tons of resources, whether or not it's for your volunteers, your teachers. Remember the Media Vault. Imagine all this content on demand. year-round, not just during D6 days, so that you can do staff training. You could have one of these played just for the parents of your teenagers, your children, whatever you want. Emails that would be sent out to cultivate your volunteers and your teachers. And don't forget the toolbox. When your parents bump into the pain points of life, you can immediately send them a PDF of talking points and a faith talk that they can help their kids over that hurdle. And it looks like all of this content comes from you, not from us. What a great way to tackle it.
A special thank you to Miss Lena Wooten for being with us
Thanks, guys,
today.
for having me.
And as always, thank you, Mr. Ron Hunter, for being with us as well. Next week, we're going to have some big fun. Johnny W. will be with us.
Oh, comedian. He wowed our audience last year at D6 Conference. And we're going to have Steve Bonner.
Steve Bonner,
a professor. Actually, he's continued to move up and program director at David Lipscomb, and going to be an incredible insight as he looks at helping us understand moral reasoning within our students. Our kids are not wrestling and grappling with the right issues, and he's got some pretty strong research for that.
All right. Well, happy D6 days, everybody. We hope you guys enjoy it, and we will hope you have a great week of ministry, and we will see you next week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.